The Montana wind cut sharp across the valley, the kind of cold that made every sound travel farther than it should. And then came the voice, mocking, careless, echoing off the ridgeline. "Any snipers here, Colton Briggs?" The range officer barked it out with a grin after 15 shooters had missed steel at 1,000 yards. The crowd laughed. Boots scraped on gravel. College boys elbowed each other, their pride still smarting from wasted bullets. To them, it was a joke. To one woman sitting in the corner, it was a challenge. Riley Vance didn't flinch. She had endured whispers all afternoon, farm girl, ranch hand. What's she even doing here? Their laughter was familiar. She'd heard it from raw recruits before they learned better. She rose, quiet as a shadow, brushed dust from her jeans, and stepped toward the firing line. The chatter dimmed, curiosity replacing amusement. A Barrett M. Rad rested on the bench, rented and still smelling of oil. Riley adjusted the bipod, lowered herself into prone position, and pressed her cheek against the stock as if the rifle were an old friend. Her breathing slowed, her eyes sharpened. She wasn't on a public range anymore. She was back in Iron Vale, in the kill house, with instructors watching every twitch of her trigger finger. Target set at 1,200. Don't waste ammo, Briggs announced, half expecting her to join the failure list. But Riley didn't even glance at 1,200. She dialed the scope higher, beyond the posted range. Way out, against the shimmer of mountain haze, stood a plate nearly invisible to the naked eye. 200 meters. Nobody here had even bothered to try. The students smirked. "She doesn't even know the limits," one whispered. Riley exhaled, long and steady. She counted the seconds of wind drift. The trigger broke like glass. The bullet sang through the Montana air. For a heartbeat. Nothing. Then clang. Steel rang from beyond 3 kilometers. The echo rolled back across the valley like thunder. Silence swallowed the range. Every head turned. Every jaw dropped. Colton Briggs lowered his clipboard, stunned. The boys who'd laughed at her now stared as if they'd seen a ghost. Riley didn't celebrate. She simply worked the bolt, chambered another round, and sent a second shot, another hit, then a third, each one carving her name into the mountain air. The crowd erupted shouts, disbelief, phones whipping out to record. Briggs muttered, "Well, damn." The sarcasm drained from his voice. What no one here knew was that Riley Vance wasn't just a ranch girl with steady hands. She had once been part of a unit so classified its name never made paperwork. She had trained to make shots that civilians thought were myths. And the shot she had just fired wasn't just impressive, it was a declaration. Across the gravel lot, an older man watched without cheering. Dr. Nathan Cross, retired counselor for combat veterans, studied Riley with a frown. He'd seen that posture before, the stillness of someone who had carried too much war into civilian life. Riley set the rifle down and turned away from the gawking crowd. She wanted to disappear, to drive home, to pretend it never happened. But it was too late. The video clips were already uploading. Whispers of "who is she" spread like wildfire. And in the corner of the range, a man in a black jacket with mirrored sunglasses typed a message into his phone. Found her. Riley didn't notice. She thought this was just a shot to silence doubters. But it was more, much more. That single bullet had awakened eyes she never wanted on her again. Because the world knew her now, not as Riley Vance, ranch hand, but by the code name she had buried with her past, Black Viper. And the ones who had been hunting Black Viper just learned exactly where to look. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me where in the world are you watching from. I love seeing this community scattered across the globe. And if you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next mission. They called it a fluke at first, a miracle shot caught on shaky phone cameras, passed from neighbor to neighbor. By nightfall, the clip had leapt from county gossip to state headlines. Black Viper was no longer just a code name buried in Riley Vance's past. It was a question on everyone's lips. She drove home under a pewter sky. Barrett Emrad secure in the back of her truck. She'd wanted it small. Just another Tuesday at Iron Vale Ridge. But nothing stayed small in a place where people traded rumors faster than grain at market. Eleanor Vance was waiting on the porch, framed by warm kitchen light. 65, a retired English teacher. She had the kind of presence that made words into laws. She studied Riley's face the way others studied poems, finding meaning in every line. "You're late," Eleanor said, calm but weighing. "Range was busier than usual," Riley replied, stripping off her coat. They sat with mugs of tea, the boards of Falcon Ridge creaking under their boots. Riley described the shot in clipped sentences, the cone, the silence, the stunned crowd. Eleanor listened. Worry braided into patience. Betty called. She says the whole town is buzzing. You made an impression." Riley's jaw flexed. "It was one shot. Doesn't mean anything. Maybe not to you." Eleanor leaned closer, her voice carrying that teacher's authority. "But people will start to remember things you worked hard to bury. And not all those people wish you well." Riley exhaled, staring into the steam of her cup. "I came back here to disappear, not to be a headline. You don't get to choose what others see," Eleanor said. "Only how you answer it." Before Riley could reply, headlights rolled up the drive. Dana Holt, editor of the County Weekly, climbed out with her teenage daughter Chloe in tow. Dana carried her work like armor alert, insistent. Chloe had a notebook tucked under her arm, already living in headlines. "We need to talk," Dana said briskly, stepping onto the porch. "By morning, your shot will be a story. By afternoon, it'll be Kessler's problem. Raymond Kessler, the developer behind the Silver Creek expansion. To most, he was just a name stamped on county contracts. To Riley, he was the smell of polished boardrooms and bulldozers. His company, Aegis Dominion LLC, had more muscle than ambition-armored trucks, contractors with military haircuts, timelines designed to steamroll. Why would he care, Chloe asked. Blunt as youth. He wants land, not you. Power hates surprises, Dana said. And a combat veteran who can hit 4 figures on a rifle range is a complication they don't want. You'll be painted as dangerous or unstable. It's what they do when someone messes with their playbook. Eleanor's rocker stilled. How fast Dana hesitated, then delivered the blow. The county hearing on Silver Creek moved up to Friday. Riley's eyes narrowed. That's 2 days. Exactly, Dana said. Less time for opposition, less time for evidence. They'll try to make the vote look inevitable. The porch went quiet. Riley saw the map in her mind, their ranch carved up into parcels. A corridor stretching into someone else's ledger. 2 days wasn't a hearing, it was an ambush. You could ignore it, Eleanor said softly. Say nothing, stay out, and let them bury everyone else, a voice cut in. Marcus Vega stepped out of the shadows by the truck, broad-shouldered, ex-Marine. He carried the weary certainty of a man who'd seen fights stacked against him. They talked late into the night, options spreading like cards on a table. Dana pressed for publicity push Riley's shot into wider news. Drag attention onto the expansion. Riley balked. Attention was the one thing she had sworn never to chase. Eleanor worried about exposure, about predators sniffing weakness. Marcus leaned forward, jaw hard. Don't frame this as your past, he said. Frame it as land. Once it's about the people, they can't isolate you, Riley countered. Voice sharp. If it's about land, they'll weaponize the law, file faster, push harder, and we won't have time to fight back, which is why they moved the hearing, Dana said, smart, merciless. The weight of it pressed down. Riley traced her finger over the rim of her mug, seeing steam curl like a map. She hated that soldier's instinct rising in her chest, hated how it made the choice clearer than she wanted it to be. Hide and watch her valley carved up, step forward, and risk dragging the war back into her bones. "I need time to think," she said at last. "One night." Dana nodded. Chloe gathering her notebook. Eleanor squeezed Riley's hand, a mother's silent plea to stay safe. Marcus lingered by his truck, arms folded, a quiet guardian who knew the storm was already here. The taillights vanished down Falcon Ridge Road. Riley stayed on the porch, moonlight catching in her eyes. Somewhere beyond the fields, engines rumbled. She couldn't shake the sense of being watched not by neighbors or friends, but by men who measured worth in acres and leverage. A phone buzzed on the porch table. Marcus's message lit the screen. "Emergency meeting tonight, Copper Horse back room. 1600. Riley read it twice, the weight settling in her chest. She glanced at Eleanor, then back at the road disappearing into night. The clock had started, and whatever choice she made, there would be no going back. The Copper Horse sat at the edge of town like a held-breath neon sign flickering. Beer-stained bar. And that back room that had hosted everything from messy divorces to county meetings. Tonight the poker chips had been pushed aside for maps and quiet urgency. Veterans filed in slow and deliberate faces weathered by campaigns and winters. Hands that still remembered how to find seams and weak points in anything. Riley stepped into a silence that felt thicker than smoke. Marcus Vega stood by the wall, shoulders squared like an anchor. Jonah Briggs, former Army intel with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, tapped ash into an empty tin. Dana Holt shut her notebook with a soft snap, which meant she was listening for what would not be printed lightly. Eleanor sat off to the side, her profile sharp in the lamplight, a living ledger of what this valley had sheltered and lost. "Glad you came," Marcus said without ceremony. "We need to hear your version straight. Nobody's going to spin this for us." They spread a county map over the table, thumbed into creases from years of use. The red line that ran through it, the proposed Silver Creek corridor, looked less like infrastructure and more like a guillotine. "Aegis Dominion isn't buying land." Jonah said, "They're buying control, roads, river access. School routes hold that corridor and you dictate who stays and who goes." Jonah's voice carried a technical edge. He'd spent nights sifting through encrypted chatter and purchasing records. And he'd come with facts, not rumors. "We've seen pressure ops already, truck tires slashed, anonymous letters, a couple of staged incidents to rattle people, and intelligence suggests they're coordinating with outside contractors who have federal connections. That's why the scale is different." "Scale," Marcus repeated, chewing the word. "And speed. Friday's hearing isn't a civic process. It's a deadline. They move the timeline. They win before anyone organizes." Riley folded her arms, feeling the weight the way a soldier feels wind on exposed skin, an environmental fact to be reckoned with. She had promised herself the war was behind her. This was not the same theater, but the tactics were familiar. "What do we have?" she asked. Dana tapped a tablet, eyes tired but fierce. "Public interest growing. Local paper runs it tomorrow if we give them meat. State outlets need proof contracts, communications, anything that ties Aegis to coercion or clandestine surveillance." She looked at Riley. "Your shot galvanized people, but noise without proof gets coughed up by lawyers." Jonah leaned in. "They have a site south of Ironvale Ridge. Heavy perimeter cameras, sensor arrays, vehicles that aren't typical of a development crew. Satellite logs show unusual communications. If we can get proof of contracts, of coordination emails, signed agreements, payment trails that ties corporate to federal or contractor assets that stalls legal action. Light on the public record, heavy on the ledger, a veteran at the table, the oldest. Hands like split firewood spoke low. "So what? We march in, take a gander, and turn it over to Dana." Riley's answer was immediate. "No. We do recon, quiet, identify the nodes where the files are, who's in charge, what resources they're using. We pull metadata and priority documents that prove collusion. That's enough to freeze the hearing and force oversight. Silence settled. The choice smelled like old soldiering covert work. Risk that bled into lives. Eleanor's voice cut through the hush. Riley, you swore you were done with that life. Riley's face softened for a heartbeat. I swore I wouldn't pick fights that didn't matter. This matters. This is their attempt to erase homes, histories. I can't pretend I don't know how to see them off. One by one. The room committed small, practical things that a battlefield would later call logistics. Marcus volunteered transport an old pickup with a grill guard and a trunk that had carried hay and gear. Jonah offered intel he'd bring SIGINT experience, surplus monitoring gear, and a drone to watch patrol patterns. Dana would line up rapid press outreach and secure copies of anything retrieved. Others offered safe houses, legal contacts, watch rotations. The mood wasn't bravado. It was a sober vow. Why you, Marcus asked, not accusatory but querying the obvious. Because they saw me at the range. Riley said, they'll expect another marksman. They won't expect someone who knows entry points in comms, underestimate a tool, and they hand you advantage. They sketch timelines, windows of low patrol activity, routes in and out, rally points if things went wrong, plan Bs multiplied like contingency maps. Jonah cautioned about speed. We're not walking into their servers and copying terabytes. We take metadata, emails, finance ledgers enough to draw the line from Aegis to whoever's signing the checks. It's possible, but it's tight. We get one shot. Conversation thinned into practical prepping, battery packs charged, radios checked, night optics calibrated. Cups of coffee cooled into the kind of bitter sludge that kept people from falling asleep. At the back of the room, the bar's old clock ticked. Indifferent. Outside. Montana breathed a hard cold. Riley pulled her jacket tighter, scanning the ridgeline with that old habit keeps, blind spots, and places where a truck might park and wait. Her eyes caught headlights idling on the far road, a truck with windows darkened, engine ticking in the night. It stayed too long for casual travel and then eased away when she stared right at it. Tail lights vanishing like a staged retreat. Back at Falcon Ridge that night, Eleanor listened to the old rhythms in Riley's movements. Riley disassembled the Barrett on her kitchen table by lamplight, oiling parts with the mechanical reverence of a person rebuilding something trusted. It wasn't just cleanliness. It was ritual that steadied a mind prone to quick alarms. A buzz from Riley's phone broke the quiet. Jonah drone confirms activity at the compound doubled tonight. Their patrols shifted. Her chest tightened into a strip of ice. She let the breath come slow, steel calm, settling over muscle. She slid the rifle back into its case and set it near the window. Then she whispered to the dark. Not a boast, but a notice black vipers awake. What she didn't know as she shut off the lamp was worse than being watched. Far off. A surveillance van idled by the compound perimeter. Inside, a man scrolled through intelligence, pulled in the night faces, license plates, and now, a newly flagged name, Riley Vance. Beside it, in a file stamped high in red. Someone typed a single directive and hit send. The word appeared on screens in a chain of command she could not see. Neutralize. The Copper Horse's back room emptied into the cold, and men and women walked back into a landscape that had changed, somewhere between the tavern and Iron Veil Ridge. Strategies hardened into commitments, and the next move, whoever made it, would not be polite. The night at Iron Veil Ridge was heavy and starless, the kind that made shadows feel alive. Below, the Aegis Dominion compound gleamed with too much order containers lined like soldiers, razor wire curling atop fences, and floodlights that hummed with authority. It wasn't a depot. It was a fortress pretending to be small-town business. Riley crouched in the tree line, Barrett resting across her knees. Every muscle remembered a rhythm she'd sworn to leave overseas. Jonah's voice cut through her earpiece, calm but tight. 45 seconds, maybe. My rig will blind the main feeds. Delay the rest, gap. not blackout. Copy, she whispered, breath frosting in the cold. She slid downhill, silent on frost-stiff grass. At the fence, she clipped wire with padded cutters. The floodlight stuttered Jonah's jammer chewing into the network. She slipped through, hugging shadows, and picked a side access door. Inside smelled of solvent and paint, too clean for anything honest. The hallway led her to a humming core servers stacked like altars, lights blinking secrets. She slotted a rugged drive into the console, not a massive dump, just headers, ledgers, and key files under 50 megabytes, enough to prove collusion without dragging transfer time. Progress bars crawled. Her pulse ticked faster, Jonah warned. 30 seconds, east cameras still lagging, but they'll catch up. Riley's eyes froze on federal seals stamped across contracts' joint agreements between Aegis and a shadow branch of Homeland Security. Not just developers, deputized operators, footsteps. She killed the screen and pressed into shadow. 2 armed men entered. Commander wants files cleared. Too much heat on the locals. Orders are simple. If Black Viper shows, neutralize. Riley slipped behind them, heart hammering. Outside, Jonah hissed. 10 seconds, nodes are rebooting. Then alarms shrieked. Floodlights blazed alive. Sirens howled. The compound woke like a beast. Riley ran. Bullets spat dirt at her heels as she dove beneath a container, sprinted again, and slammed through the gap she'd cut. Wire tore her sleeve, but she tumbled free. Marcus's truck barreled down the service road. She vaulted into the bed as rounds sparked off steel. Got it, she shouted, holding the drive. Good! Marcus growled, flooring it, but black SUVs surged from the tree line. Headlights hungry. Jonah's van joined from the flank. 2 tails, maybe 3. I'll try to split them. The chase ripped across county roads. Riley braced in the truck bed. Barrett steady. An SUV drew alongside, rifles bristling. She exhaled and fired. Steam burst from its radiator. The vehicle careened into a ditch in sparks. 1 SUV left. Jonah swerved to block. His van clipped, rolled with a shriek of metal. Jonah, Riley shouted. Static answered. Marcus forced the last SUV toward a cattle fence, but it clung close, ramming them hard. Ahead, the wooden bridge of Silver Creek loomed, planks rattling in the wind. They'll push us into the water, Marcus said. Knuckles white, not if I push first, Riley muttered. Chambering around, she fired into the engine block. The SUV coughed but slammed them again as the truck hit the bridge. Timber groaned. Then the night split open. Rotor blades thundered. A spotlight carved white fire across the bridge. A helicopter swooped low. Side door open, rifles glinting. Marcus cursed. They brought air. Riley's stomach clenched. This wasn't intimidation. It was elimination. She steadied the Barrett skyward, aimed not at men but at the sensor mast glittering beneath the cockpit. She squeezed. A flash. Sparks cascaded. The spotlight died. The helicopter banking hard, climbing with systems wailing, for one breath. Silence. Then the roar of engines behind them reminded her the hunt wasn't over. The truck cleared the bridge. In Riley's vest. The drive pressed heavy as a heart. It held enough proof to turn light on what Aegis tried to bury, but also enough to mark her. Jonah's voice finally crackled. Ragged, but alive. Copies sent. Rendezvous go. Riley swallowed hard. Somewhere in a file stamped with seals and red ink, her code name was written beside one word, neutralize. The morning after the infiltration. Silver Creek looked almost serene. The river glimmered beneath a pale sky. Cottonwoods whispering in the breeze. But the town square was braced like a battlefield. Veterans in worn jackets, ranchers with calloused hands, young families clutching banners. They all gathered beneath the flagpole. At their center stood Riley Vance, the Black Viper, shoulders squared, the stolen flash drive clutched like a talisman in her fist. County commissioners took their seats on the stage, Flanked by security contractors with cold eyes, cameras rolled, broadcasting the meeting across Montana. The Aegis Dominion men radiated confidence. They believed the locals were already beaten, their land as good as signed away. Then Riley stepped forward. Her voice was low but clear, cutting through the murmurs. "This is what you've hidden from us. Surveillance on our homes, financial kickbacks, federal signatures on illegal seizures." She slammed the flash drive onto the podium. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A screen flickered to life. Jonah's decrypted files scrolling in brutal detail contracts, maps, chain of command links tying Aegis to federal operatives. The crowd erupted. Commissioners paled. The reaction was instant. Aegis guards surged forward, rifles raised, intent to silence her. But they weren't the only ones prepared. Marcus Vega and Colton Briggs moved from the crowd like shadows, veterans falling into a protective line around Riley. Hands rested on weapons not to provoke, but to promise not this time. Above the roar, the beating of rotors split the air. An Aegis helicopter swept in low, spotlight hunting for her. Riley's breath slowed, memory of the compound searing through her. She raised her Barrett, but not to play action hero against the pilot. Instead, she targeted the bird's antenna array. One clean shot cracked through the Montana air. The helicopter wobbled, sensors fried, spotlight dead. The crowd roared with defiance as the machine retreated skyward. Crippled but intact, that moment shifted everything. The veterans' line hardened. The townsfolk surged with chants. Even the commissioners realized the tide had turned. Faced with overwhelming evidence on live display and a crowd ready to fight for their homes, they capitulated. Eminent domain orders were suspended. Federal agents withdrew under scrutiny. Aegis Dominion's grip shattered. Later, when the dust settled, Riley sat on the back steps of Falcon Ridge Ranch. Eleanor pressed a blanket over her shoulders, eyes soft but proud. Dana Holt's daughter, Chloe, ran past waving a homemade flag. Jonah and Marcus leaned against the fence line, trading the quiet nods of men who'd seen too much but stood anyway. Riley's hands still bore scars from barbed wire. Her nights would still hold echoes of war. Yet when a local reporter asked how she'd describe what happened, she gave the only truth that mattered. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," she said. "Eyes on the flowing creek. It's standing your ground when fear tells you to run." The crowd fell silent at those words, as if carved into the air itself. And, in that silence, Riley Vance, the Black Viper, was no longer just a sniper with a record shot. She was the voice of a community that refused to be erased.